Welcome to Peter's podcast, where we talk about real yoga, actual happiness, and deep living. Thanks for joining me. Namaste, Stephen.
Namaste, Peter.
Nice to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Talk about things yoga.
Mm.
Yeah. So I put myself on the line because I arranged to do a workshop at ISHTA on April 2nd. And I'm patterning it a little bit on a thing I did in Australia back around Christmas time, where I got to talk to a bunch of teachers at Tamara Yoga, just kind of about yoga in general, how I'm thinking about it, what I've been thinking about lately, some of the kind of perspectives on it. I was just in Wendy's workshop, and she was bringing this beautiful perspective about like listening and using the body as a way of listening, and the vagus nerve and sort of interoception thinking. So, I'm kind of considering it a bit of a discussion, open format. I'll have plenty of things to say, but I'm also interested in what people are curious about. So since we're here today, you can be the preview and we can talk about what you're interested in.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I have a first thought question, which is, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about introducing folks to Tantra and what that has been like for you, and if you feel like it's easier or harder nowadays to talk about Tantra philosophy. How do you feel it's received these days?
I think Tantra philosophy has always had this sheen of being about sex. And so anybody who comes in without any understanding is always wondering, well, what is this and what does it have to do? And then usually when we present it through an ISHTA lens, we're talking about Kriya, and we're talking about, doing asana in a way that doesn't hurt you and these kinds of things. And by the end, everybody's like, but what about the sex part, And so I don't know that it's different or easier or harder to talk about it now. It's always been a little bit of a 100% learning moment, like teachable moment, right? There is this way of doing practice that helps you transcend your normal way of thinking about things. It does this by expanding your sense of who you are. And that expanding is a little bit philosophy, but it's mostly about feeling it, right? So, I usually bring it right to the word tantra, that, tanoti of expansion, triati of liberation, right? And what does liberation mean? It means I don't feel so stuck. I don't feel so little. I don't feel so powerless. Instead, I'm in a different perspective regarding me, that, and how me and that relate. And so the practice, though, of doing that, the Tantra yoga practice, involves all these different tools. And at certain points in history, it involved sex between a teacher and a student, or between two practitioners. And it's not the kind of Tantra lineage that I'm in, so we're aware of those practices, but the practices of, like, at the time those practices were coming about, when all of this yoga stuff was coming about, all of the teachers were just people who had experiences of this liberation, right? And then they taught people around them, and there was no internet, and there was really not even printing presses, right? So there
Mm,
were just lots of teachers in lots of remote locations teaching people based on their own experience.
mm, hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, you know that too from the way that we empower teachers at ISHTA to sort of learn the fundamentals of what is this experience we're trying to have a practice so that you actually experience that, and then go off and share from your place of knowing,
Mhm.
right? Which is different from some schools that are very like by the book, you know? I don't
Yeah,
mean BUY, but they're like BY the book, you know? Like, this is how you do it.
right. This is how you do yoga, and this is how we get you to the experience of yoga. It's by doing these 9 things,
Yeah,
8 things.
yeah. And you must look like this when you're doing them.
Right, right, right. I've been having a lot of conversations with Scott, who helps to run ISHTA Yoga, and Mona, one of the co-owners of ISHTA Yoga Studio in New York City, about the way to get people to realize the kind of practices that we're doing at ISHTA, what makes ISHTA unique. And something that I keep coming back to is the fact that it feels like it takes a lot of words to explain ISHTA. And to me, I think one of the most compelling pieces is the foundation, or the foundation of Tantra philosophy, and this idea that the practice can help you to have an expanded experience, an experience beyond who you think you are or your perceived self limits, so that you can live a liberated life. But like you mentioned, I think that people's minds go someplace specific, and I'm wondering, I sometimes wonder, like, is it time to reclaim this word, not to say that there's an us or them, but just to give more clarity about what tantra, the word, really means, and what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, you know, as a teacher and as somebody who teaches people who want to be teachers, I think that it's incumbent upon us to tell people who come to yoga class, yoga practice, what is yoga?
Mm.
Because they don't know. I mean, most people, when they try yoga, somebody brought them
Mhm.
or they saw it on a TV show, you know, like somebody was carrying a yoga mat on a TV show, or their doctor said, you know, yoga would be good for you, or their friends are going. They don't
Mhm.
know why they're there. They don't know
Mhm.
what yoga is. I mean, really.
Right.
So I am, I think in probably at least 30% of my classes start with the sentence, yoga is, and then
Right.
fill in the blank, you know, depending on what I want to talk about today.
Mm.
You know, because otherwise, how do people know what they're doing? They just think they're supposed to accomplish these poses.
Right. Right. They think it's gymnastics or stretching or conditioning.
Hmm.
Um, I'm kind of curious. I was so it gave me so much joy to hear you talk about tantra. So I'm curious about maybe what's your favorite place to go with yoga is, or what are your top three?
I very often will, you know, quote the first few sutras and talk about, you know, this state of mind that is available to us, that is natural. It's more like I almost think of it as kind of a developmental phase, being able to experience from a different place. And as an example of that place, it was so fun for me the other day because you were teaching a class in the front room at ISHTA, and I was teaching teacher training in the back room. And I had just said that yoga is about, you know, creating this stillness, this pause in the activity of the mind, which allows you to have an experience of who you are And as soon as I finished setting up these students who were about to do a meditation, I heard you saying the exact same words in the front room, right? We were
Uh-huh.
like on the wavelength, right?
Mm,
And this is an example of the kinds of things that happen to you when your sense of me goes from being this big and it's all about what I see in a mirror, right? This is
mm,
me, to allowing yourself to have this bigger experience that is more related to a, a consciousness that pervades, and there's a mantra that we use at ISHTA every time we do meditation practice, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, right? And that word Vasudevaya, it means all pervading, right?
mm,
So that mantra is a call to the the divine nature that is pervading everything,
mm,
right? And when we do yoga, we turn our perspective, right? It's like you're now looking at yourself as a part of what is the all pervading divinity of existence, instead of looking at little individual poor me who is powerless and the world happens to,
mm,
right? So, the way the sutras say it is you do this, you come to this state of mind where the thinking is quiet enough that you experience yourself as the awareness, as the who you actually are as awareness. And it makes this distinction, and this is something I say in class a lot in this what yoga is thing. All the rest of the time, you think you're all the stuff you're thinking about. You
mhm,
think that you are these thoughts. And, what a dramatic shift in how one would live one's life, to go
mhm,
from just being a bunch of whatever's in your mind right now to actually feeling like I'm, a part of this wholeness that is here.
mm. So beautiful.
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about that. In your meditation class recently, you talked about how if we kind of wind back, zoom way, way back, back, when the universe was just the universe and maybe it didn't have any of us in it, or
Right.
just thinking about the universe just as energy.
Hmm. After
And
the
then
Big Bang.
after the Big Bang, you can kind of, it's easier to think of the universe at that time as just being energy. And then you just capture some of that energy and matter and stuff to become one of us human beings. And we did a meditation on the Grantis. And if you're not familiar with the Grantis, it's this idea of like sort of causal knots that hold a piece of the universe's energy into sort of the shape of a human for the time being as we're being human. And then we soften those knots so that we can have this experience of being the universe. And I've been thinking a lot about that. And since you brought it up, and it is a really like delicious thought to sink into. If people are looking for a reason to do yoga, it's one of those things that occurs to me that when enough people are practicing yoga around each other and really practicing, you start to see your value as a part of this whole more. You start to see everyone else's value as a part of the whole more. And in that way, it really creates a feeling of, mm, it can create a feeling of this community's got you, or this planet or universe has got you. You are part of something bigger. Um,
Absolutely.
mm,
Yeah, I love that thought, and you phrased it so well. When I wrote a book for artists, Yoga for Artists, I was sort of following that same idea when I said, if you find yourself on stage, say with a guitar in your hand and you're about to express yourself, it's really something to imagine that the entire evolution of the universe has brought this moment to be, right? Like, go for it, right? There you are. You are that, right? You are that expressing as this in this moment, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's true of all of us. Like when we think there's no value, or it seems like this is a waste of time, or what am I here for? Or everybody else is so successful and I'm X, I mean, to think this, you are the universe. And I mean, there's like all this you know coaching and stuff like this that talks about you being able to create whatever you want or whatever. We're creating what we want in every moment. We are here co-creating the universe as us, right?
Mhm.
Most of us are doing it with no intention, or we go in and out of intention, or we go in and out of even awareness,
Mhm.
right? But and that's not to say you can create, whatever you want, but if you're conscious, you're at least aware of what's going on. What are you creating? What is the choice I have right in this moment of creation? And then now this moment of creation, and now this moment of creation, you
Mm.
know? And so much of the time, we're almost like just a vessel, like stuff is flowing through us. I don't sit here and go, okay, so what is the next sentence I'm going to say to Stephen? It just comes out, right?
Mhm.
And yet there are these moments within this sort of pseudo, influence where we do make choices. And one of the biggest ones is like, do I want to get a hold of who I am, and what does that mean? Like, I read this book from a really famous author who died a few years back. The book is called Your Erroneous Zones. And gosh, I can't believe I can't think of this guy's name right now. But anyway, it's written like 50 books, but they all, take as a baseline, you're responsible for you, right?
Mhm.
That's the only place you really have ability. But
Mhm.
you blaming you on other circumstances, or blaming how you feel in other circumstances, or in this, or your erroneous zones book, he was talking about, you can have a nervous breakdown. Why would you want to do that, right? But go ahead.
Right.
Or make a different choice, right? So it's like, that kind of empowerment moments that we have
Right.
access to.
Totally. I've heard you say in your class, I don't know if you'll remember this, so I've heard you say in your asana class that really the advancement of the yoga practice is the mastery of the inner world. That and when you just said really we're co-creating our lives here in the point where we and the universe meet in this present moment. Um, and it made me think, yeah, and as consumed as we are about creating big projects or creating big manifestations outside of us, if you really whittle it back in the moment to moment living, we have this opportunity to create our inner world, which then becomes whatever's outside, or lends itself to whatever's outside. um, and that is really what we're doing in yoga class, is trying to help people see that they do have access to this this ability to shape what comes up inside, or see what comes up inside and maybe redirect it.
Yeah, we're giving them a chance to practice doing that
Hmm.
in this little laboratory,
Yeah.
2 by 6 feet yoga mat, right?
Yeah. And still learning, dude. Like you, even in your class last week, I think, or the week before, you were like, Warrior Two is a great pose for build. It's designed for building focus. I was like, I was like, whoa. Yeah.
That's funny.
uh,
Yeah.
I'm curious, as a next question, what what tools do you find yourself reaching for on a day-to-day basis?
I am reaching for the tool of samyama all the time. Like, can
Mm-hmm.
I pop into meditation and bring some insight, inspiration into whatever's happening right now? And so that requires a meditation practice and whatever it takes to get to meditation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So making the time for it, doing the preparatory stuff for it, whatever it takes. I've been practicing for a long time, so it's a little easier than it was 20 years ago for me to find that state,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it still requires something, like I go to yoga class because it helps me sit down and do it for a little longer than I might typically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, that's part of the tools that I find good. Um, I study, I read, I ponder, I think about, I write things down, I talk with you, and I mean, all of that is helpful for sorting things out.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that kind of self-study very helpful as well. What are your practices that help you most?
Um, I have been like, I feel like it's a marble in my hand, and I've been moving Vairagyam a lot around a lot of letting go of results and just doing things and then letting go. I think that yeah, I've centered myself in perfectionism without realizing that I have, and that's become really clear to me. And so I feel it come up in the meditation itself. Um,
Like
in
judging your meditation?
Yeah, judging my meditation, looking for it to become something really specific
Yeah.
and it never getting there when I'm looking for it to, and then realizing whenever I let go of trying to do that, that's when it becomes the thing that I am looking for it to do. But it's that energy of looking or expecting that
Hmm.
keeps me out of going all the way into the meditation.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I
and
think we're all way too judgmental of our meditations,
yeah,
because it's written about in such flowery language always, like because it's describing nothing. Okay, do nothing. Oh, this feels good doing nothing. Maybe I have some kind of minor experience of something, color or sound, insight, whatever. And it's written about like, you know, I don't know, like how do you write about that? But and yet people keep doing it. It was really always written about in all of the yoga texts and by poets and and even now, people use language about bliss, and bliss is such a funny word, and I mean, is it bliss like ecstasy, like orgasm? No, I don't know many people who have that kind of a meditation. So, and then you get into the tantra question again, which we started with, like, oh, is are what we're trying to do like have really long orgasms, and then it's like, okay, so all of that stuff is in the realm of mental activity or emotional activity or some kind of physical sensation. And what yoga is talking about is something that's like the container that holds all of those things, right?
Mhm.
Like, what is the power source that lets all of that experience happen,
Mm.
you know? And so to sit there and be in a place of judgment or wanting to have an experience or having an experience and saying, ah, that's the experience, right? All of that is just the mental activity or the emotional activity or the it's the stuff, it's the, engagement of this world of the senses and so forth, whatever you want to call that, the manifest universe.
Mm. Mm.
So, yeah, which is all, not, it gets tricky because, it's like a little teaching is a little bit of cheerleading. You want people
Mhm.
to want the experiences, we want them to do the practices. And so you say encouraging things, but any of that encouragement, it's like the Tao, right? The Tao that can be talked about is not the Tao, right? And the same thing when you have an experience in meditation, it's like, well, okay, don't focus on that. Don't get caught up in that. Don't be wanting that. It
Right.
just it sounds nuts. That's where the Buddhists get into this language of no, not that, no, not that, no, not that, no, not that. What you're left with, and there's no more not that's, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mm.
So that's a pretty tough sell. We're selling nothing.
Hmm. And yet, once you know and you have the experience of the thing, it's so profound.
Yeah.
And
And it
so,
does tap you into this part of us that's called bliss in the tradition. It's like this joyfulness aspect of yourself,
mhm.
right? It's not like bliss in isolation. It's like I'm me having an experience of a thing that makes me feel more, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
One closing, I guess not closing, or
Yeah.
a question about your workshop or your day-long workshop is what are you kind of marbling on, and what are you most excited to talk about, without going too deep, but like, is there something that you're really excited and that you've been thinking about that you want to talk about with the group?
Um, what I'm most excited about is the incredible diversity of experience in the world. And, there's a lot of judgment about so many things. And there's a lot of people running around saying, I have the answer, right? You just have to follow my course, or you just have to do my kind of yoga, or you just have to, you know, have me as a coach or whatever. And for all of those people, I'm sure that that worked for them, but each of us brings our own unique flavor into the world. And we're like, this is this song, right? So this song is going to sing now. And through the coming to know oneself, that's your way in, right? So that's how you do it. People get drawn to different people who have some relationship with that. Everybody who goes to Alan Finger has some need that he's able to provide the answer for, while they're engaged with that. And so I'm really fascinated by how there's just one reality, but there's so many ways to have the experience of it. And what does it mean when we do have that experience, and how can that transform the way that life goes on? Sort of the
Mm.
opposite of what politics is doing to us right now.
Yeah. Mm. Hmm.
But I do believe, there's some answer for some people in that realm as well. It's just that's that's where they tap their bliss. And
Mhm.
it's in a genuine way, and it's helping people in the way that it can. Right?
Mhm.
Um, and no matter which way you go, and I guess this is part of that whole diversity of experience piece. It's like no matter which way you go, you have every pitfall and every opportunity. So how do you find it within that? Al used to tell a story about some guy. I think he when we were on 56th Street, there was a cafe or something downstairs, and he said he ran into some guy, and the guy said, "Oh, you're that yoga teacher, right?" And Al said, "Yeah," and he goes, "I do." I don't know what he did. He did something else, some other practice. And Al said, "Great." And the guy goes, I don't really I never liked yoga. It didn't really do it for me. And I said, well, do your practice, just that's great. Just got to do it. And that's it. I mean, I know practices where they say this is the way things work. And then there's other practices where they go, no, the opposite is the way things work.
Mhm.
So either one is wrong and the other is right, or they're both wrong, or they're both right.
Mhm.
And in my own observation, they're both right.
Mhm.
You just have to buy that system and
Mhm.
speak. It's like you're a software engineer, right? It's you got to speak in the code,
Right.
and you don't start introducing other code into that language,
Right.
right? Or else the program doesn't work, right?
Right.
But as long as you're talking in that syntax, bingo, right? And I
Totally.
believe that that's life,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And it's no confusion that we've, developed this way of speaking where it's like this isolated way of doing this, right?
Mhm. Right.
And we each find our own ashram and our own self study, our own ISHTA Devata, right? Our own personal spark
Mhm.
that helps us transcend and be able to experience individual me and universal me.
Mhm. Beautiful. Beautifully said.
Thanks.
Mm.
So, what are you teaching this week?
Hmm. I haven't decided yet. I think last week
Do you
we
ever
talked.
decide?
I do decide. Yeah. I usually I like to decide on something because I think as someone who runs anxious, I don't want to like I want to have something to fall back on.
Right.
Um, and very often, like like my great teachers have told me is the case. I usually have something, and then I get in the room, and something else inspires me, and we go that direction.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been kind of needling around with the sutras, and so I think that's where we were last weekend, as you observed, and
Mm-hmm.
um, so we might use that as a jumping off point again. Mhm.
Right. Nice.
Thanks.
I was ringing chakras on Thursday. I think I'll do that again tomorrow.
Oh, nice! I'm excited for that.
The chakra guitar.
The chakra guitar. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, man, I can't remember. I was like, I had something really juicy in my classes last week that I was like, oh yeah, that's sick. But I can't remember. It's gone,
That's great.
and that's how it is, I think.
But the students who it really moved, they remember it.
Yeah,
And they'll come
exactly.
up to you and go, what was that thing you said?
And
And
I'll
you'll
be like,
say, I don't know, what was it?
I feel like I do that to you most weeks. I'm like, you said this thing, and I loved. And you're usually like, what did I say?
That's the vessel thing.
hmm hmm
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Stephen.
Yeah.
And have a great week. And
Thank
we'll
you.
we'll talk soon. Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have this time with you.
Thanks.
Thank you for asking me.
You bet. Namaste.
Namaste.
What is yoga and why do we do it? A deep dive for practitioners and teachers. April 2nd, ISHTAYoga.com.